Go ahead.
So, can you talk about the creative process in terms of
Okay.
healing?
So in order to understand how creativity has helped me to heal in my own life, I think I think the first thing to say is like sometimes it's hard to know that there's even anything to be healed. Sometimes for me, like my life has actually been pretty trauma-free when I can think of it in terms of a lot of people's lives. When I think of people living in different parts of the world, when I think of people living in war zones and things of that sort, that my life has actually been fairly blessed. And yet, I think all of us, there's this universal thing that we wrestle with as human beings, which is basically our authentic selves and our egoic identities or our personas. And I think that the authentic experience of being a human being, the joyful experiences of being a human is basically when we let our personas and our ego identities just sort of fall away. I mean, it happens in lots of different contexts. I mean, I can think of dancing. It can happen in sexual euphoria. It can happen in meditation. It can happen eating a reverently prepared meal. There's so many times where it's just like, for a moment, we're popped out of our thinking about the world as an outside observer and actually dropping into the world as it is. So, I've already talked about how, like, while I was training in this really kind of creative profession, architecture, I actually started to feel less creative because I was starting to think of who should I be as an architect? What am I supposed to know about things? As opposed to allowing that primordial awareness, that consciousness is not only in me, but is in all things, to basically, and having trust in the world to inform what was going on.
I'm sure there's probably a pressure. I mean, because there's architects throughout history who are known for a certain style, known for a certain design style, right?
Exactly.
So you sort of want to make a name for yourself.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things is that people do it sort of prematurely. They want to make a name for themselves on some level, and yet what they're doing is they're looking at, they're identifying with things that have already been named. Like saying, well, am I modernist? And so there's modernism somewhere out there, and then they try to either aspire to be that. Like, I like that someone aspire to be that. As opposed to, I mean, what's really, and that's, when you do that, that's where we run into trouble, in my opinion. What really makes us so important as individuals is that all of us have had really unique experiences on the world, and there will never be another one of us in all the world. It's like, when I'm gone, there'll be no more Austin Hill Shaw. There's never going to be another Rosalind Fay. Your experience is unique, and therefore your lens upon the world is unfathomably precious. So, that's why when I say this idea of connecting with the world, it's basically, when I say connecting with the world as the experience of insight, what that means is that actually you're dropping the stories about who you should be or who you think you are, and you're letting the world as it is come rushing in. And really, it's a two-way street. It's actually, you're building a bridge out to the world at the same time, just by being you. And that's why the most profound creative ideas come from this sort of like opening up. That's the beginnings of healing. And this healing we talk about, what I talk about in creativity is actually the quintessence of the spiritual path in all religions, which is basically, you begin with renunciation. You renounce the things that aren't working for you. So experience of insight is sort of a renunciation, which allows you to feel suddenly nourished by the world as it is again. That's like step one of healing. And then once you start to feel some sense of stability and confidence within that you actually, who you are matters, not because you're this or that, but just because you're a being, then you can start to move into the next phase, which is basically the experience of working in the world, of being with other people, of service, of compassion. And that creates another sort of healing. I mean, what I love about doing the NLP work is that, it allows me to actively go out and be with another person's experience and learn from them. And because I'm being empathetic there, that's my job, that's my job as the healer, really what's happening is that I'm being healed as I'm healing. Because again, I've built another bridge. This time it's with a person. And I have enough stability within myself that I know no matter what happens here, like if it gets really intense, I can be with them, And inevitably, since, we are all connected on some way, it's like when they're going through their process of healing, I'm also going through my process of healing. Even though it may not be my exact same story, it's part of my story. And again, in this web of relatedness and interrelatedness, that healing starts to become just... And then you move into, so those are the two poles. And then you move into what we call the non-dual sphere, which is actually the Vajrayana path, the indestructible path is what that means. And basically that is where, and Vajrayana also means lightning bolt, where we're building as a lightning bolt, creates almost like this beam of light that connects heaven and earth. And what you're doing there is basically the healing involved has to do with our ability to approach these really difficult unseen things in our lives that we may have put aside, our so-called shadow material, and allow that to come up too. And that's like the most profound healing of them all. Because then you're no longer like a partially healed person, with this you do on the side. You start to be fully honest. It's like, I drink too much on occasion, that sort of thing. And it's okay. I might probably do that again in my life. And that's okay. It's no longer about being like taking this aspect of yourself, this new improved version of who you are, and to the sacrifice of this other thing. Like true healing embodies everything. It embodies all aspects of who we are, and allowing, you could talk about it in terms of like our energetic systems. It's like the lower chakras to be in harmoniously aligned with the higher chakras, like survival, sexuality, and power, which are always repressed in the West. To bring those up and be like, okay, how's this creative center, my sexual center, work with my ability to express myself? Those sorts of things. Does it means it needs to be sexual, but there's a life-giving thing behind it. So I think that really the more we heal, like if you think of a figure like the Dalai Lama, like the reason people are so attracted to him is because he's healed himself. And he heals other people by being around them, because they recognize there's nothing hidden here. Who you get is the person standing in front of you. It's not like, hey, I'm this guy on Tuesdays, and then, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm like kind of a mess, in my trailer home, like with the shades drawn, watching violent movies. It's like you're honest about what your experience is. You're honest about your unique experience on the world, even if they're not particularly accepted by society. That is the most profound healing of all. And that healing, really, when we look at it, I put it at the realm of spirit, because it's actually saying, hey, for whatever reason, whatever mysterious reason, I've come into this world, and so much of what I do in this world, I have so little that I'm actually responsible for. I don't have to digest my food, I didn't have to come up with the language I use. I didn't have to make all the clothing or like construct this house. I get to participate in the world. And then recognizing that all these things have been given to me on some level, then you can say, okay, what is it that I want to bring? What's true for me? What jazzes me? What can I bring to the world? And that allows for a healing for other people. And I think that's why, when we create things that are true for us, and it doesn't matter what it is, creativity may be a new scientific formula, or a new vaccine for something, or it may be a poem, or it may just be the way you make a Christmas card, or something like that. All of those things can be expressions of the you who is you, who's been brought into this world, and one day will exit this world. It's just like, yeah, that's the healing right there. And but of course, in order to do that, you have to go through, you have to go through periods where it doesn't feel really good. Healing some depression, some anger, some sadness. They go part and parcel of being a human being. And they're not to be avoided. They're to be embraced. It's like, gosh, I'm really run down today. Maybe I need to rest. Those sorts of things. Wow, I'm really angry right now. Maybe I need to go out and just scream. There are, since we are these incredibly rainbow spectrum beings with corporal bodies, with really subtle minds, and with boundless spirits, we have to work with all these very diverse things in order to feel fully whole, And therefore we have to tend to our physical needs. We have to work with our minds and also our stories, knowing which stories are good stories and ones that aren't serving us, and also figuring out ways in which we connect to something bigger, whether it's through nature, whether it's through spiritual practice or service, whether it's through reading literature, like, these tales that seem to show the human drama, in 100 pages or so. All those things can help us to connect further and further into our own lives, but expand outwards into the lives of others. So that's kind of the healing journey.